We do not have a tight agenda. I'm going to give us 5 minutes more to see if we get anyone. We'll count that as the chair discussion time. I notice Swadesh or DJ, would you like to do a mic check?
Okay, so can you hear me? Hello.
We can hear you,
Hi,
DJ.
Yes. I'm sorry, DJ.
Hello. Okay. Okay, great. Thanks.
Thank you.
Swadesh, Kaliraj, did you also want to check your microphone?
Hi, Jeff. Hi, Sue. Hope I'm audible.
You're audible and you need caffeine. Good morning.
Good morning. Thanks.
And Swadesh, we saw your microphone light up, but we didn't actually hear you.
Are you able to hear me?
We can hear you now. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
G, do you want to try your microphone?
Not yet?
We did hear you, G.
We did hear you. Thank you. Okay, we've got 2 minutes
I
left.
cannot hear you now.
I can hear you, G. Okay. We're not getting so many to start this morning. I realize that starting on a draft, ITF draft cutoff day is always challenging. We'll give it about 2 more minutes. Please note the note. Please read the note well. You've seen it before, but please review that anything that you do talk about is subject to the code of conduct and to the IPR. So please go ahead and read that. Make sure your audio and video are off unless you're presenting. Here are resources for you. If you're seeing this, the G has kindly put all the presentations online. If you're having trouble seeing, bring down your own presentation and blow it up. The agenda is bashing. We'll do that. We're going to start that now as I walk through it, and then we will start presentations. The presentations will go with car issues, just to recap our last interim. Then DJ is going to present the status. Then we'll do the same thing for CT. Kaliraj is going to present the status. Then we're going to have an open discussion for 15 minutes about the next steps. As I've published, our next steps are to publish both CAR and CT as experimental, and then begin work with intent aware or color in IDR based on the CAR draft. We're going to cover, if we have time, the fact that I'm running 5 adoption calls. I'll explain them, and if we have time, Guyan will and I will walk through a little bit of his CPE informational draft and how that's an add-on to the Draft G IDR-MP extension Format C. Give us a little time to talk about it. G will also provide us a short discussion on draft wing. Okay, I've run out of my 5 minutes. Is there any other agenda bashing that we'd like to do this morning? We will try to make this through by 11:15 again because today is a draft deadline. Okay, given that's it, I'm going to share another slide set with the shepherds on car. Give me a moment and I'll start to lay this. This is just a feedback for all of you who may have missed last week's. There are wiki reports that I did after the car working group last call. The shepherd's comments. Remember, there were these issues in the car working group last call based on a discussion. There was a single thread, so if you missed it, go capture that single thread in working group last call, walk through it. DJ has responded to Jeff, I hope, on the list this morning on his concern on type 2. There was directorates reviews done, and we went from there. We also need confirmation on adoption call. Right before we do a working group last call, I'm going to ask again if anyone has any comments on the fixes for the adoption call or the work or the technology issues. The car authors feel they have completed this. Cisco is got the type 2 completed and waiting for interoperability, and I believe Argus is in process. So what are we car authors presented on 925 was the type 2. And if you missed it, please see it today. They're going to respond to our status and talk about the two things that were promised for the list. The first was posted, just question and follow-up discussion on is IPv prefix appropriate for the charter of the adopted draft. I believe DJ will be sending some things out today, and Nats did not provide me comments. With that, we will go with the car status report. DJ, would you like me simply to run the slides for you?
Sure, so that would be great.
Okay.
Okay,
Do you
I think you can go to the next slide.
Mhm.
So, as Sue said, I mean, the last interim we had walked through the various issues and provided clarifications and the action items. So, right now we're just in the process of making the draft update. Can you go to the next slide, please, Sue? Yes, I won't go into the details since we covered it last time, and hopefully further discussion would occur once the draft update is posted. But yeah, mainly we were trying to clarify the usage of the type 1 versus type 2 routes, as several of the issues were focused on that, and also for since the type 2 description and usage was later on in the draft, just reorganizing it based on the comments provided so that it's covered upfront. Same thing with the use of the LCMEC. And then yeah, some minor clarifications on a couple of the other issues. And yeah, so just on the comment you made, so yeah, so the we did respond to Jeff. Jeff had given us some more comments, so we were just waiting to update the draft. I just sent him, a response that was not on IDR. It was more, in private, but I can post it to IDR once, once the session is over. Next slide, please. Yeah, and so we're targeting some more changes, in later versions once the window for posting opens up. Also, if there are any further, feedback based on the, based on the exchange with Jeff.
And I thank you. It's always useful to discuss things first between you, but it is good to, in this topic, also to send it to the IDR list so we can close that issue. Thank you, DJ. Is there anything else you would like to say, DJ?
Not at this time, so because I'm not covering any content. More this was just a quick status update to say where we are.
Sure. Thank you. Is there any questions for DJ? Otherwise, we'll go to the Shepherd's report for CT. Well, folks, we may get done very quickly today, which is just fine with me. Give me a moment for CT. Okay, Shepherd slide for CT. As I mentioned earlier, the Shepherd slides are on this list. CT is published -17 with fixes ready for second working group last call. There is one open issue. Swadesh, I would appreciate if you would review -17. Color Argentine feel like they have made progress on your adoption to call issues and your comments from working group last call. Would you please review -17 and send suggestions for improvements to the list?
Yes, I will take a look. So I saw the mail on over the
Yes.
weekend. Yeah, I have to look. I just skimmed through it, but I have to look into the details.
I appreciate your detailed review of this. I'd like to make sure we've closed that before we go to a second working group last call on CT. So I'll follow up this week and hopefully we can close this off.
Sure.
Thank you, Swadesh. Appreciate your help. Jeff,
No problem.
the CT authors feel your comments are resolved. Is that correct?
I need to do a top to bottom review and make sure that they're covered, but I understand that they believe that they're taken care of, and hopefully this is last review.
Hopefully. We have the Med has responded for the routing to review that everything is covered. We're waiting to see if the obster, but we've closed the issue because a couple queries. So we believe CT is wrapping up to go toward working group last call. The rest of these slides were topics that we worked through. Again, adoption calls have been made, early reviews have been done. We'll go through another early reviews because that's required prior to sending the draft to the ADs. With that, I'm going to go through Kaliraj's update. Let me make sure I've got that. Kaliraj, I can run the slides for you or I can hand them off.
Run the slides. So
Okay, please go
before
ahead.
that, looks like Keyur has a question.
No, a
Kare,
quick comment.
did you have a question?
End of my review soon, hopefully by end of the week, to you authors as well as the chairs.
Yes, and I do appreciate G as part of the chair team and as a secretary has provided review. I believe Kaliraj, those have G's review went to the main list. If not, I will forward it directly. And care. We appreciate your review. Please go ahead, Kaliraj.
Okay, thank you, so. So, hi everyone. So we're just going to present status of the BGP-CT draft. Next slide. This is the quick agenda. Just a recap of CT and changes since the previous IDR interim that happened last month, and status of the GitHub issues. Next up. Next slide, please. So what is CT? It's again an intent-driven service mapping solution that is transport protocol agnostic, service family agnostic, works for MPLS and SRv6 or other data planes as well. And it provides per route granularity with fallback options using some formalized constructs that works in option A, option B, option C kind of networks. And it works for anycast and unicast endpoints, also heterogeneous and non-agreeing color domains. These are some real-world deployment realities that we are seeing. And it is in different stages of deployment in different customers. Hopefully, we'll see deployment soon. Next slide, please. So what are the changes in the recent version 17? So basically, we had covered most of the issues by last interim. There were some issues open. So we just go through what were they and how they have been resolved. So the receive side handling of the reserved bits, Med had some concern about how it was stating that this field should be ignored on reception. So he was asking what is the case where it may alter it. So I got his question. So basically, we just clarified it saying it should be ignored on reception and must be left unaltered. And the reason it's like saying should be ignored on reception and not be must, that's based on Jeff's input that it may be possible that we have policy constructs or something that want to match on the reserved bits and do some filtering or those kind of firefighting knobs. So that's the reason we want it to be ignored on reception, but it must be left all unaltered so that it presents predictable value to the version 2. And then there were a lot of comments about normative references to individual drafts in the CT draft. So to address all of them, we have moved the procedures that were using these individual drafts to the respective drafts, or in case of SRv6, a new draft. So the procedures for SRv6 that were depending on the draft SALI, they have been moved to a new document as suggested by Ketan and Jeff, and moved the procedures for the signaling intent over PEC attachment circuit, which we're using MNH attribute, to the MNH draft, and moved the procedures about how to scale BGP MPLS network using MPLS namespaces into the MPLS namespace draft. So these technologies, they are like also independently logical building blocks. So it makes sense to just move this there and put a reference, just an informational reference in the CT draft. So with these changes, there are like no normative references to individual drafts in CT, draft CT. So this was one of the major comments from Jeff and Ketan in the last interim that's been taken care of. And in section 10.3, so this was about this is about the comments that Swadesh had with respect to the route scale and whether the label changes on different failure modes. And we had a very comprehensive table, but as suggested by Ketan, we also added some clarifying text saying what is the mode that we recommend customers to use and why, and what are the pros and cons of each. So with this, and also while going through this, we found that there were some errors in the table in figure 7. So we fixed those. So with this, I think all the comments have been addressed. And next slide, please. As part of addressing the comments, so we have also sent emails to all the originators to the list and closed the GitHub issues that were tracking those comments. So there were 25 issues opened, and those are all closed. Currently, there are 0 issues open. And the routing DER review with the last comment being addressed from Med, I think it is done, but I've not seen the state move. So request Med to re-review the latest draft and provide approval. Same with BOVU for the ops DER, please provide approval. And the security director review, that is like still pending, request review. And this is the alias for the GitHub issues. Next slide, please. Yeah, so mainly what's pending is security DER, and I think we are ready to go RFC.
So we will, thank you, Kalaraj. I think these are backup slides and references. So folks, that is our plan. My one action item is to make sure you've all heard this. Please review. I'll get a targeted review from Swadesh on his one issue, and we will go off to a second working group last call. Questions for Kaliraj? Okay, we're going to go off to the next presentation, which is back to the slides. We have the shepherd slide, just a minute. I'm not finding them. Give me a moment. So our next question is simply to have an open discussion on my intent to select the next step for intent aware. So I have published my results, my reasoning, the support. Is there any discussion? Although we've completed early, we may have an open discussion on the Shepherd's Review, which is that most people seem to appear to want to put the current CT toward experimental, and to use the CAR draft as the basis, not the draft that will go to proposed standard, but the basis. Now, the difference between experimental and proposed is I encourage people for experimental to add more background detail, to add more explanation why. The purpose of an ITF experimental is to provide an early drafts on a technology. We should have looks at what scales, what the technology does, and the general use case. As we go to proposed standard, we should have put that behind us and focus on merely the protocol issues. We hope to get early feedback from experimentals before we get things off to proposed standards. I'm now calling for comments about this decision. Kaliraj, you're welcome to provide your comments.
Yeah, so just like you said, we need feedback from the experimental before we make any call on the proposed, right? That is why we were waiting on it. So I think it is too soon to talk about that.
Okay, that's one feedback. Anyone else have any feedback? The reason I have to answer Kaliraj, the reason I have made this forward push is because many people, from operators to other vendors, have called for at least a indication of what's going forward from the IDR chair, since in this case I am the shepherding chair due to affiliations of Jeff and Care. That is my forward going comment, is that's where we're heading at this point. I still think we need to publish both of these as experimental.
Yeah, but I mean, if you want to make any suggestions in that respect, I would request considering all aspects with respect to the completeness and practical deployment perspective and the state of implementation, maturity of the solution, everything. Thanks.
I agree, and that was my initial discussion with the working group, but the feedback I have gotten from numerous people is that operators and other vendors would like at least an indication of direction. So if I have to indicate direction at this time, that is what the sense of the working group. Anyone else want to give any pros and cons? Okay, anybody feel like I'm off in the weeds in my sensing of the working group? I think I still continue to think we need to push these experimental stuff through, get the experimental state. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
So the one part I'll sympathize with Dr. Kaliraj. Number one, schedule you're working through. We should make sure that gets published in a very public place because that's part of what you're being asked to do. The second piece is Kaliraj's main comment is when things move from experimental into proposed. At the moment, the focus is getting the drafts actually to a RFC stable point so they can be published, and theoretically people can start working through the different implementations. What exactly is your expected timing from date that we hit RFC for experimental to trying to make a status change? I think that's the piece I'm a little bit unclear on.
Okay, so number one, I posted this before the September meeting, and this meeting was to follow up to close on this. I posted it on the mail list for everyone so that you've got that. I've given you a month to look at it and provide feedback. As to the change date for when we look at this, Jeff, it depends on both of these drafts going to experimental.
Yep.
Since, and so I'm going to call the question again, but the point that I was asked by members of the working group was to give an indication of direction so people could plan. So at the time we finish both of these experimental and send it off to the ISG, will reconsider it, and the draft that I've selected, that the working group has indicated, the CAR draft, will start with the proposed standard again with a call for adoption toward proposed standard. That's the only thing we can do to be absolutely clear. Okay, so these are all going toward experimental, and then a text that would be going for proposed standard will be there. And the chairs will treat it as a standard way to look at a proposed standard draft. Okay?
Okay, I believe you. I actually don't recall where this was in the mailing list, so if you could in chat when you have a moment or to the mailing list is fine as well.
I will be glad to send out the reference to the mail list. I will also be glad to send another note on this out today, but it will come after our meeting.
That's
I
fine.
don't think I can quickly find it in the mail list while running the rest of the meeting. And that's
No,
just my apologies for being focused. Is
no,
there
it's
anyone else that has, these are very good comments. I've struggled to make everything clear and open with this discussion. Okay, I did indicate the direction earlier, Jeff. I did not indicate the procedure. I will make sure to document that after we finish the meeting, which looks like it will be quickly. Any other comments on intent aware? I scheduled a second meeting because we didn't get to this topic. Okay, the reason the chairs have brought CAR and CT into interims is to allow plenty of discussion time. The ITF sessions will not have CAR and CT on the agenda. We wanted to make sure we caught up with past work that hadn't gotten to the light, haven't had enough time at IDR sessions. Okay, let's go at calling once, and I'll pause here for a minute to make sure everyone has a chance to ring the button.
So I'll try to ask again, what did CT lack that you made a choice of indicating? At least I hope it's just an indication, not a decision at the moment. So what can CT do better so that it can become a proposed standard candidate? Because what we hear is in all respects, CT is ahead, but then you are choosing the other one.
So let me answer your question, Kalaraj. As the chair said at the beginning of the working group adoption calls, thanks to Jeff's very good work, that we felt these two proposals were functionally equivalent. We had hoped that they would merge. If I look at both of them, they are still functionally equivalent. I didn't say specifically equivalent. However, consensus is the job of judging consensus is judging what the working group in general decides to go forward with. I may have personal feelings on both of these drafts. In this case, I am judging working group consensus, Kaliraj, which is not the question you've asked to me specifically. That question needs to be focused to the working group because my sense from private and public support is that people have chosen to support the CAR draft. And that is, I guess that's the clearest discussion I can give you. There are many pros and cons, and I've been detailed in my written reviews because of that. As to CAR CT, I believe you have cleared all my issues. I believe I've been very clear about what issues by written text that the CAR experimental draft still needs to clear to go to second working group last call. That's not going to answer the question you asked because that the question you asked is for the working group and not necessarily for me as the shepherd judging consensus.
Yeah, I mean, just wanted to inform you that there are many customers who are in the process of deploying CT, so you may want to consider them as well.
I will continue to consider that. I urge the working group to consider it as we go forward toward a proposed standard. Anyone else want to make a comment? Okay, I will be respectful of your time. We are doing something to catch up. The working group has 2 sessions. Let me pause. Jeff and Kare, did you have anything else we should consider on the CAR CT as co-chairs before I go on to the adoption topic?
Nothing for me.
Kare?
None for me at present. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you both for your support. Now we're trying to catch up. We clearly said before we went into a lot of the car CT that we'd heard the working group, that we'd listened to the fact they wanted to see car and CT have more time, which means other people had less. That included giving some time for debate or the chairs not having as much time to do adoption calls. So we're trying to catch up. The first three adoption calls are things that you can read. Zhang IDR SR policy adds metric to the segment list. Lin IDR SR policy seg list adds segment list to the segment list. These are short. Look at them, comment. Draft Sangley IDR BGP generic metric. AIGP gives AIGP with multiple types of metrics. Please be carefully read the interaction with metrics. These, I believe, have asked for brief status at the ITF. They will close by the time we have the IDR meeting, so that may get moved. The informational draft we did not call prior to this is intent routing without protocol change, and that's gone for informational. And I've asked G to give a very brief summary of that at this point so you know what you're working on. And again, the purpose behind all of this is to catch you up. The last two drafts that I wanted to draw your attention to before I switch over to G is draft G IDR MP BGP extension format 6. And that's an attribute to try to provide mapping. I've sent out a shepherd's comment on this. There seems to be interested, but there's a lot of questions to work through. The Mishra IDR v4 Island 6.4 core 4P node is informational. I asked Guyan to give me a presentation, and I may highlight some of that in this meeting since we have a bit of time. And again, all of this is a quick burst so that you can look at it. The Mishra will have a call later, but I wanted to make sure you knew that we had one proposed standard change and one informational. With that, I'm going to pop over to the draft Wang IDR CPR 03, and G will be doing the presentation. G, I will run the slides for you, if that's okay.
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you. Can you hear me?
I can hear you clearly.
Okay, good. Hello, everyone. This is Jedong. I'm going to give a brief update about the BGP colored prefix routing for SRA6-based services on behalf of all my co-authors. Okay, firstly, some recap about the CPR. Basically, this draft aims to provide a mechanism to establish inter-domain intent-aware paths for the SRA6-based services, and it is based on existing BGP technologies. That is why this is an informational document. Some key points in this draft is in this document, it requires to allocate different SRv6 locators, or call it sublocators, to represent different intent or color. That is why these SRv6 sublocators are called a colored prefix, as each locator represents a color or intent in the network. And this IPv6 unicast address family is reused for the advertisement of these colored prefix routes. And another reused technology is the color extended community is already defined in RFC. We reuse this extended community to indicate intent associated with the colored prefix in each network domain. So in different domains, they can use a consistent color mapping, or they can also use different intended color mapping. This is very flexible. And the resolution of the CPR routes to the intra-domain intended aware paths, it can be, the intra-domain paths can be either based on SR policy or flux algo or existing T tunnels. This resolution is based on the next hop color tuple. So this is similar to the existing resolution technology used. Another point we want to highlight here is with this CPR mechanism, it can provide some optimized data plane operation and encapsulation for the interdomain SRv6 based services, as it takes advantage of the IP reachability of the SRv6Cs. Note that we know SRv6Cs are routable across domains, and it can reuse the longest prefix matching mechanism for the IP packet so that we can match the SRv6Cs to the CPR routes during the packet forwarding. With this mechanism, the CPR does not require a dedicated SRv6 transport seeds, so that it can reduce the transport seed and can improve the encapsulation efficiency for the SRv6 SRH encapsulation. Okay, next page, please. Here are some updates in the recent update. Firstly, we updated the terminology from the colorful prefix routing to the colored prefix routing. The latter one is more accurate to express what is really the meaning with this term. And luckily, we still have the CPR as the acronym. A second update, we add further clarification about the usage of the existing technologies with CPR. We reuse the colored extended community as defined in the RFC 9256 for the intent path steering, and reuse the SRv6 services mechanism as defined in RFC 9252 for the routing and forwarding to the shortest passes. We also simplify the example of the CPR route advertisement. So now we take the consistent intended color mapping case as an example, and we also give some description that this mechanism also supports the different intended color mapping in different domain cases. With this update, we also have some new co-authors, Ketan, Tao, and Ran provide valuable comments and suggestions to this draft. So welcome to join. Okay, next page. So the next step for this document is to have the working group adoption call. It has just started on the IDR mailing list. So welcome to give the review of this latest draft and give us some of your comments and feedbacks on the list. Thank you.
Any questions for G? This again is a service to you as you look at this draft for IPR. And seeing no one, I'm going to take a moment and Guyan, if you will let me sort of highlight a few things, we'll go through this.
Sure.
So please, folks, realize that the focus of this draft is in connecting IV4 islands over a IV6 core. This provides an informational piece. It is a additive draft to the G draft. And with that, I'm gonna give Guyan, if you could just be very brief and go through this in about 5 minutes, that would be helpful.
Actually,
Sure.
we had Kaliraj in queue.
Kaliraj,
Yeah, I
you
just
have a
wanted to
question?
note. I just wanted to note that using IPv6 unicast as a transport family is not a good idea, as has been discussed in many occasions earlier.
Was Kaliraj, was that for G's draft?
Yeah, that's for CPR.
Okay. Do you have, I should have paused longer. Guyan, if you will hold, I will let G respond.
Okay.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that part has been discussed and analyzed in the draft, in the CPR draft. I think we think that that is maybe some trade-off for operators to consider whether they can use an existing address family with some filters being provisioned to avoid some the leakage of the infrastructure routes. Otherwise, or they can also consider to introduce some new address families to easy the isolation or separation of the transport route and the service route. That is up to the operator to make this decision. We just provide the tools and the uh, choice for the operators to consider. Yeah.
Kaliraj, did you have any further comments for G?
No, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Please continue that discussion on the list for CPR. It has been mentioned before. G thinks he's provided it. Please discuss this as we adopt. It's meant to be a strong discussion. And Kaliraj, I appreciate your comments on this. Guyan, again, if you will try to complete
Yep.
this briefly. I
Susan,
believe,
can everyone hear me?
yes, I can hear you. I will move slides for you. Just tell me next. Guyan, I'm not hearing you. Go ahead. I see Guyan trying to speak. He may have gone out and come back to see if, Guyan, did you try, are you still trying to speak? If not, I will go through it with him. Guyan, can you
I'm
try to
back now.
speak?
I'm back now. Can you? Yeah, can you hear
Go
me
ahead.
now? Sorry, it looks like I
I
lost.
can hear you
Okay.
now. Please go ahead.
Okay. So the motivation behind the 4P draft. So basically, so an IETF standard exists for 6P RFC 3798. However, a standard to this date does not exist for connecting V4 islands over an IPv6 core. So this draft provides an informational document of connecting V4 islands over an IPv6 core. And with this, it provides a method of tunneling packets, V4 packets over an IPv6 LSP, and that's called and that's termed 4PE functionality. And historically, and I'll just kind of mention this historically, the 6PE it was termed 6PE because it defined IPv6 labeled packets over V4 and with that historic term 4P as well was defined for provide for advertising V4 labeled packets over an IPv6 core. And the next slide will kind of go through that in a little bit more detail, but that with the flexibility, it does not necessarily have to be labeled packets. So a recap on 4PE. So 4P routers exchange IPv4 reachability information over an IPv6 core using multi-protocol BGP. Um,
You're a
to
little
dynamic.
soft, Guyan. Speak up a little into your mic.
Okay, sorry. So the 4P routers they exchange IPv4 reachability transparently tunneled over an IPv6 core using multi-protocol BGP. Next hop field is conveyed with the IPv6 LSP. 4P uses the RFC 8950 next hop encoding. The ingress and egress 4P routers or you have an option to either bind a label to the IPv4 prefix with a with a two-level label stack, or they have an option to have a P2P LSP where the customer prefixes are unlabeled. And then last alternative option is a per CE label table LSP with customer prefixes are unlabeled. 4P provides a lot more flexibility than its predecessor 6P by providing making the options available to not necessarily have require the V4 prefixes to be labeled, and they can be unlabeled. 4P design also supports inter-AS options A, B, C, and AB, and as well supports newer technologies such as segment routing, SRMPLS, and SRv6 data planes. Next slide. All right, so the latest draft updates, the first one is that we've changed the draft from standards track to informational. So the 4P draft provides some flexibility from its predecessor 6P, which had the rigid requirement that the V4 prefixes that are tunneled over the V6 core having to be labeled. So now from feedback on the mailing list over this past summer, there are other alternatives in that the V4 they're technically the prefixes do not have to be labeled. The V4 prefixes that are tunneled, and they can be unlabeled, and there's different ways of doing that. So what we've outlined as an addition to the draft is a number of use cases. In those use cases, it's broken down into different categories with the topmost label, which can be an arbitrary label or an implicit null label, as well. It could be an explicit null label. And then with the 4P customer routes, we've broken that down into different options, and they have parity with IPVPN, which everyone's familiar with label allocation mode with per prefix, per VRF, or per CE label allocation modes. So with that, so the option that we have is one that really has parity with its predecessor 6PE is with where all customer prefixes are labeled, providing an IPv4 per prefix label allocation mode. So it's not as scalable, but that is the original, and that has the parity with the predecessor of 6PE draft RFC. So the next option is an ingress PE to egress PE loopback. LSPs is created, and then with that, that LSP carries all customer prefixes unlabeled, and this would be similar to an IPVPN per VRF label allocation mode. So basically, you have a single LSP, topmost IPv6 LSP, and then all your customer prefix kind of sit inside that unlabeled. The next option is a per CE next hop LSP is created based on the on the CE next hop, and there all the CE prefixes are unlabeled, providing a per VPN per CE or per next hop label allocation mode, similar to that. And with that, it does provide an optimal convergence. Pick like optimal convergence with a single, where if a single CE LSP is withdrawn, all the CE prefixes that are unlabeled related to that prefix are automatically withdrawn as well. I have, and the last bullet there is I have added a implementation section for Cisco, Juniper, no on the draft. So any questions or comments? And we're short, I guess, getting ready to proceed with a adoption call to be starting soon. Thank you.
Kaliraj, go ahead.
So I think in this approach, we are carrying service routes in V4 labeled unicast. Is that right? Jan?
Gayan,
Yes.
Kaliraj asked you a question. Are you unable to speak?
Yeah, no, sorry, I didn't hear the question. Could you? Yeah, sorry. Could you restate
So
it
the
back?
V4
I
labeled
didn't hear that.
SAFI4 is carrying service routes in this approach. Is that right? IPv4 labeled unicast, SAFI4, is carrying service routes. Is that right?
Yeah, so this is for I think the question was for SAFI4 so the SAFI4 service routes is not a requirement to use SAFI4, that the
Mhm.
prefixes can be unlabeled. They don't have to be labeled with the topmost LSP. So the prefixes don't, so in this draft I think what we're providing is a little bit more flexibility, that the customer prefixes, they do not need to use SAFI4. I think is that I believe that was your question,
Yes,
Kaliraj.
yes. I would recommend not using SAFI4 for carrying service routes.
Okay.
That was my comment. Basically,
Okay.
if you are saying that there are any cases where SAFI4 can carry service routes, so my questions were related to that.
Okay. Very good. Very good. Thank you. Thank you, Kaliraj. Thank you.
Yeah, basically, when you do that, I don't think you can do option C, because SAFI4 will be used as a transport family in some of the domains, and some new domains, if you're using it as a service family, then you'll be mixing these two.
I see. I see. Okay.
But
Yeah,
if I
Guyan,
don't
go ahead.
go ahead. So I don't understand, if you're not using SAFI4 for carrying service routes, then how do you signal the labels, explicit null, implicit null, etc.?
And that is for the inter-AS option C. So Kaliraj, are you saying that I think you would be required to, and that's a really good point that you make. But if, let's say, for inter-AS options, that you would have to use SAFI for if you're doing inter-AS option C, but that would apply. So, and I agree with that. But let's say if it's intra-domain, then the service routes could be unlabeled. You agree with that?
So the service routes need to carry explicit null only for handling some specific cases where the penultimate hop is not able to do the forwarding properly.
Right.
And only in this case we need the label. But we need to have a uniform way that works for all cases. It's not like if one of the penultimate hops is not supporting it, then you use label family. Otherwise, you use unlabeled family. That will be very confusing, right? So we should have one way of seamlessly carrying service routes in INET unicast or INET 6 unicast, and then it works for all different scenarios. That will be possible only if you carry a label on the service route without needing a new family.
Uh, understood. So Kaliraj, but is that, let's say if I understand what you're saying, that you would require that, but is that only for inter-AS option C, or you're saying even for option B?
Even for intra-AS, basically 6PE or 4PE can be there for just intra-AS as well. The PSP problem happens for intra-AS as well, right?
May I encourage Kaliraj and Guyan that you exchange some information on this on the
Sure.
list,
We'll do that
talk to
offline.
each other,
Okay.
and send it to the list before we do a working group adoption call for this, so Guyan has a chance to
Thanks.
address his problems. I
Yeah.
appreciate that.
Thanks, Kaliraj. Thanks for the feedback, and I'll post it
And
to the minute.
yep. And with that, is there any other comments on the upcoming adoption drafts that we should cover? Otherwise, we will end our session 15 minutes before we thought we would. And again, I will indicate we have a bunch of adoptions. Please, if you wish an IDR presentation, please make sure to send G a request, and we will see you virtually, for most of you, I suspect, at ITF 118. Jeff, any other comments? Kay, or any other comments?
None for me.
Kayer?
None from me as well. Thank you.
Have a great day, folks. Thank you very much for joining us today. Bye-bye.
Bye. All right.